Okay, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I am joined by Courtney Ackerman. You contribute a great deal to positive psychology, which I think is really cool. That's something I've only recently discovered. Um, and I think a lot of people know, at least in a general sense, what psychology is. Most of us who went to college at least had to take like a Psych 101 class. When we're referring to, I guess, specifically positive psychology, what exactly term does that entail?
So positive psychology is it's basically a shift in perspective from traditional psychology. So traditional psychology over the last 60 or 70 years has really focused on the negative. It's really focused on abnormal psychology, on clinical psychology, on things that can go wrong. And positive psychology is sort of a correction to that focus on the negative, to turn it towards the positive. So instead of just looking at what goes wrong and the negative and the unpleasant side of life, it looks at the good things. It looks at what makes us thrive and what makes us flourish and what makes us happy, and the top performers and the people who do amazing things, the people who are sort of the outliers in the positive direction instead of in the negative.
Mhm.
So it's sort of a separate field, but still all part of psychology. It's just like, hey guys, we've been looking at this kind of depressing stuff for a really long time, which is good, right? Like we need to look at all that depressing stuff. It's very important. But like, hey, maybe we check out this like gratitude and optimism stuff too.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
My hat's off to whoever came up with that. That's amazing.
Yep.
One of the things that I thought was interesting is I had read one of the articles that you did on positivepsychology.com, which anybody out there listening who's never been there, I highly recommend it. But you had done an article on self-awareness,
Hmm.
which I thought was really interesting because it was sort of one of those things that I never, I think, really intellectualized myself, like never really sat down and tried to really take in what that means. So in that sense, I'm just going to give the floor to you. What would you define as self-awareness?
Yeah, so you'll sort of find a lot of different definitions of self-awareness. Like it's one of those things that like we all kind of have an idea of what it means, but when it gets down to actually defining it, it's kind of tough. But generally, self-awareness is realizing that you are not your thoughts; you're the one who's experiencing them. It's being aware of your own thought processes, your own thought patterns, being aware of what makes your emotions spike in this certain direction, or that you have a tendency to think this way after this happens. It's getting to know yourself really in the way that you will get to know people around you really well. Like I think we are really good at building awareness of others, that especially if we spend a lot of time with them, like your partner or your best friend, or your colleagues at work. Like you get to know them on this level of knowing their tendencies, being able to like predict how they're going to react to things, but we don't always apply that to ourselves. So self-awareness is basically getting to know ourselves, as if we are sort of our own whole unique other person, which we are. It's sort of a different way of thinking about it. I think we often sort of forget that we are our own our own person, our own little cog in the greater machine, and we forget to treat ourselves as an individual, unique person. And that's what
Mhm.
self-awareness is about, is realizing that you are.
That's kind of a that's so true, and it's kind of a trippy way to think about it, kind of an existential way of being like, you are. I love the way you put that. You are not your thoughts. You are the one experiencing your thoughts.
Right.
That is so cool. That's a neat way to look at that. And how would you recommend to someone improving that?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but sort of the main ways are to first just to carve out some space to be alone, to sit with yourself. Going back to that idea that we don't really treat ourselves as like our own individual person. Like when you love someone, you want to spend time with them, right? But we so rarely carve out time to spend with ourselves. And if we love ourselves, then we should want to spend time with ourselves, right? Like we can be fun. We can have a good time on our own. We can, learn and grow and do great things on our own. And we forget that a lot. At least I certainly have forgotten it at many points. So first, just taking time to yourself, just making actual space and time for you to be alone, no matter what that is, whether you're practicing a hobby or whether you're just sitting and staring at a wall, whatever it is, just do it, spending some time alone. And then mindfulness practice is a really, really big one too. And mindfulness practice is just being in the moment, just being here, being present, not thinking about, the past, not thinking about the future, not trying to problem solve or make plans or think about anything really too deeply. It's just being here, just being in this moment, knowing what it feels like to be in your body right now in this moment, noticing what's going on around you, seeing the, looking at my tree that's kind of gently swaying in the breeze out there and hearing the birds outside my window and just being here. And that's something that our world is sort of designed to keep us from doing, right? There's always a distraction. There's always TV and there's our phones and there's the internet and there's people constantly coming and going. And there's this pressure to be busy and to always be doing. And it takes away all of that time to just sit and be here, not worry about what's coming next, not, trying to make any big plans or solve any huge problems, but just to be. Especially the Western world is just not good at being, right? It's all about doing. We need to do. But just being is really important for a lot of reasons, and it can help you get to know yourself on a much deeper level. And then on that same track, things like yoga can really help you ground yourself in your body. And then asking people that you trust can be a good way to gain some self-awareness, because they're going to see a little sides of you that you maybe don't. We all have our blind spots. So asking for some honest feedback from people that you respect, people that you trust, is a good way to build your own self-awareness. And you can remember that they don't know everything, right? You can ask people and they're like, oh, I think you really do this all the time. And it's like, what? No, I don't. It's not true at all. But generally it can help you build up a picture. If you ask 5 or 6 different people, you put it all together and, everyone is saying, oh, you do X a lot. Maybe it's like, oh, okay, I probably do X. I should think about that.
Maybe even ask the person who hates your guts.
Yeah.
Like, hey, what do you think about me? If you want the brutal honesty, just ask them, like, why do you hate me? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I don't know if I'm reading this book right now called Tribe by Sebastian Junger. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I haven't.
He's just a crazy guy. He's done a lot of war journalism and stuff like that. And he wrote this book. It's not a long book. And the title of the book, like I said, is Tribe. And it's sort of like about what that word means, like historically speaking. And he had sort of made the observation I thought was interesting, is that when you go back hundreds of thousands of years, when humans lived in, roving bands of 20 to 50 people, your life was less stressful, but in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, and so that sort of like being able to be self-aware and be in tune with the world around you was so much more present, of course, and he doesn't make an argument like whether that was better or today's better. Obviously, life mortality back then was way worse. Life expectancy was way worse. You were worried about your kids getting eaten by a tiger or something like that. But on the flip side, now we're in this modern day society, and I think that's one of the biggest things about self-awareness, just like you were saying, is that it's almost something you have to, like, at the beginning, sort of force yourself to carve out, if that makes sense. Because you have so many stress going on. You have life, you've got work, you've got children, you've got your bills that are due, this thing that you have to catch, the next thing that you got to be to. And I think you're 100% right, how important it is to just take time and carve it out and just, this is just me. This is just sort of like personal self-reflection time.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of, I can't remember who said it now, but some quote that's like, you must meditate for at least 30 minutes a day. And if you don't have time to meditate for 30 minutes a day, then meditate for 60 minutes a day. Like it's it's vital. It really is. I mean, unless you're already just a super self-aware person and very mindful and throughout your daily, life, it's really vital to take time for yourself, to take time to tap in. Otherwise, you kind of get lost. You kind of who even are you if you don't even know who you are? It's sort of an odd question. It's like letting everyone around you and everything around you and your job and this and that define you, because you're not kind of actively defining yourself every day.
Well, and it's now become a post that I've seen several times on social media that, sort of hits it the nail on the head, where it says, take time, for yourself. If you drop dead today, your job would replace you by noon.
Yep.
And I unfortunately, I talk to people like that who, and I was just talking to a really good friend of mine who has a hobby that he's really passionate about. And he's been really stressed that he hasn't been able to have any time for it because things have been so crazy at work, and he's been having to pick up overtime to help out. And, I just kind of have a feeling, you don't want to be on your deathbed and say, I didn't get done half the stuff I wanted to, but man, I was a really great employee there for a while. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to make sure, because at the end of the day, you're the one who matters, not, corporate job, whatever. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And that sounds selfish to a lot of people, but it's really true. Like, you're born alone, and you'll pass from this world alone. And in between, you can fill it with some amazing people, but you are the only constant in your own life. You are the only one that's going to be there from beginning to end. And so you have first and foremost responsibility for yourself, for making your own life one that you are proud of.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely something to be said for work ethic. For sure. That's something that as a society we push, be the hard worker, go get them, go get them, go get them. But if you don't have a balance, then that's you kind of become all that, and then you begin to lack self-awareness, and you begin to lack all that stuff that I think really at the end of the day makes life enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Work is great. And especially if it's something that you're really passionate about. But no one should be working in all of their available time, right? Like, going back to our ancient ancestors, hunting out on the prairie. They didn't hunt for 40 hours a week. They hunted for probably 5-6 hours a week, and like they didn't spend all of their time hunting and building and doing this. If you look back at, what little we know about them, they had a lot of leisure time. They had a lot of time to gather around the fire and tell stories and to connect with each other and to learn. And we're just so, 40 is the minimum, and every hour after that, you're X%, higher status or something. There's just this
it's not bonus points, man.
Right? There's this pressure to always be busy and always be doing things, and if you're not busy, then you're clearly not important enough, to be.
Yeah. If you're not working your hands to the bone, you're lazy.
Exactly.
And gosh, and it was interesting. Again, referencing the same book I was talking about exactly that. And even when we see these tribes, these remote tribes that exist today that still operate and that kind of thing. Granted, there are a lot of pros and cons to that. On the flip side, you see a lot of things like depression is virtually non-existent. Suicide is virtually non-existent. Mental illness, yeah, but to the extent where we're talking clinically, there are some things chemically that just, regardless of where you live and where you raise, is going to be an issue. And I find that telling me how much more important it is, just like we were talking about, to carve out that time to make sure that you have, that balance in your life, because otherwise, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love the living in the now, the present minded, which is gotta be, I don't know. Do you think that's a difficult thing for a person to attain? Does it just take a lot of sort of rewiring of your brain to get there?
I think so. Yeah. It's not a difficult thing to do on a moment's basis. Like, we could do a quick mindfulness thing right now and get really into the present moment and be very grounded, be very here. But thoughts just pop up. That's what they do. Their job is to pop up when we have nothing else going on. It's like, oh, well, better fill this slot. And our brain will just pop something in, and it'll distract us, and it'll get us thinking about the past or about the future. So it's something that's simple to do, but to do it on a regular basis, to make it your sort of norm, takes a lot of practice. Which don't want to scare anybody off from doing it, but it does. It certainly does take practice. It's not just like a flip of the switch and suddenly you're mindful. It takes some practice. I still struggle, certainly, on many days. Some days it's like, oh yeah, everything's great, I'm in the moment, this is wonderful, look at that leaf. And then other days I'm like totally bogged down in this thing that I have to do tomorrow and the next day, and planning for this. And so it's part of being human, is that struggle to find balance.
Well, in modern society, we get tunnel vision so easily.
So easily.
You're like, okay, I got to go to work, and then after this, I got to be here, and I got to remember to respond to that email, and make sure this weekend, you've got that get together with so and so on. Gosh, before I do this, I need to make sure and then that's just like your constant narrative in your head of keeping track of the schedule. At the same time, there's little pop-ups just like, on your computer of like, hey, do you remember last week when you said something really stupid to the barista? And those things just keep coming at you, to just be able to block all that out. That's like some kind of essence of Zen. I feel like I have to go to a Buddhist temple to I don't know, study for months to learn how to do that.
Yeah. Well, a gentle correction on mindfulness. It's not blocking all of that out. It's allowing it to come and go. Right. So it's not like I am completely Zen, I have no thoughts. It's oh, look, a thought. But instead of getting attached to it and following it down that rabbit hole, you're just like, huh, and then you let it go. So it's like it's I totally get what you mean about like, oh, remember that stupid thing you said to the barista? Like, yeah, that happens all the time. And just to take that example, it's like your brain brings that up, right? You're trying to go to sleep, or you're trying to do something, and your brain's like, oh, hey, remember when you told that barista to also enjoy her coffee? Like,
exactly.
Well, aren't you stupid? Instead of going, oh my God, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that. It's going, huh, interesting. I wonder why my mind's trying to bring that up now. Or it's going like, huh, yeah, but we all do that.
Yeah.
And then just sort of just letting it pass on by. It's there's a exercise that I've written about, I think in a couple of my books, because I really like it. It's about letting your mind be the sky and letting your thoughts be clouds. And so you're sitting there, you're the sky, you're expansive, you're huge, you're, well, basically infinite, right? From our point of view, all encompassing, and your thoughts are just clouds that are coming and going, and you don't want to stop the clouds. You're not like, no clouds allowed, like clouds are going to come and go, but you see a cloud and you're like, oh, huh, look at that, it's a cloud. And then you watch it go, and then it's gone. And then another cloud comes up and you're like, oh, look, a cloud. And you watch it, and then it's gone. So instead of jumping onto that cloud and grabbing onto it and tearing into it and sinking your teeth into it and getting emotionally attached to it, you're just like, yep, that's a cloud. So it's similar to that. That's what being mindful is all about. It's like, oh wow, I just felt a lot of embarrassment about that thing I said to the barista. That's interesting. Huh, how about that? And then you let it go. And then something pops up that's like, oh my God, I have so much work to do on this. And you're like, huh, I do have a lot of work to do on that, but it'll get done. And you let it go.
So it's almost like letting go of control.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have control anyway. It's a big illusion that we have control to begin with. It's recognizing that we don't really have control over anything except how we respond.
Stop trying to wrestle the chimpanzee that's beating the crap out of you and just sit back and watch it instead.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
You're
I
not
could
going to
see that.
win. You're not going to win
No.
against the chimpanzee.
I wouldn't want to. Those things are
Yeah.
crazy.
No, just offer it a banana, try to make friends with it maybe, but you're not going to win.
That's really, you're absolutely right. That's an interesting sort of thought experiment to do, is just sort of sit back and I don't know. And I've always been, because I've thought about that a lot, the whole barista thing, we were talking about throughout my life. Because I've always wondered, like, not only does it pop up, but why does it pop up and why does it continue? Like, if I say that at 9 o'clock in the morning, enjoy your drink. Okay, you too. By the time I'm walking over to the table, I'm already like, the hell did you just say? And then 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're like, you really told that barista to enjoy your drink. And then you're like rationalizing with yourself. You're like, she's a barista. She hears that all the time because
All
people
the
just
time.
have preloaded responses in the chamber and fire them when they're prompted, and then you're laying down at bed at night and you're like, oh, it was a crazy day. I got a lot to do in the morning. You believe what you said to that barista? Oh my God, dude. I have to see her tomorrow. Maybe I won't get coffee tomorrow. I don't know.
Maybe I'll go to a different coffee shop in the
Right.
morning.
Yeah. God, but what if she really needs the tips? You can just spiral out of control with those things.
Absolutely. Our brains are like built to spiral.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate that we have to fight against sort of our nature there. But yeah, it's so easy for us to do that. And I don't know why. That's an interesting topic that I should look into. Why is it that it's always embarrassing things that pop up, right? When we're
Right.
just like drifting off to sleep or have a quiet mind for once, like nothing's really going on. It's like, oh, hey, remember that stupid thing you said?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why can't you be like, oh, remember that amazing, uh, date you had, or like remember that awesome time you had at the beach? Like, no, it can't bring that up. It's got to
Right.
bring up the embarrassing stuff.
Yeah. Or even worse, some like stupid random thought like, why would a lion be talking in Wizard of Oz? Those like weird sort of random sort of, and then you're like, okay, now I got to roll over and grab my phone and start Googling. And then
Which is
before
the
you,
worst thing to do when you're trying to fall asleep.
oh yeah, and then you go down the rabbit hole and it's 2 a.m. and your wife's like, aren't you gonna sleep? And you're like, not right now. I'm figuring something out. That doesn't
Really
matter.
important. Really
Yeah.
important stuff. I'm solving problems here.
I always thought it was interesting. Are you a sports fan at all?
I am not. I actually call all of them sports ball.
Oh, sports ball.
I'm
That's pretty much my wife. She's the same way. She's like, "Go team, go." Okay, did our
yeah.
side win?
Yeah, that's basically me. My
Uh,
my family, I'm from Washington and my family loves the Seahawks. And so I feel
oh,
like by
okay.
default I should probably support the Seahawks. So
Yeah.
for a while there, I learned like 3 of the players' names. I was really proud of myself. And now I think they're all gone. So I have to do some more learning about sports, I guess.
Mhm. Well, the only reason I bring it up, I thought this was fascinating. Living here in Northern Illinois, all of us who live here in the 90s remember the great Chicago Bulls teams and Michael Jordan, who played for the Bulls, who was just an absolute icon at the time. And
Hmm.
a documentary I was watching, there was a guy who spent an entire year with Michael Jordan. He was working on this book on him. And in this documentary, they interviewed him. And one of the things I thought was absolutely fascinating that he said is that when you look at somebody like Michael Jordan, he's 6'6". He wasn't the tallest guy in the NBA. He wasn't the fastest guy in the NBA. He wasn't even necessarily the best shooter in the NBA. But the thing that made Michael Jordan stand out from everybody else is that he was, at any given time, he was nowhere but where he was at that moment. He said there are people who go off and study for years and meditate trying to reach that level of self-awareness and living in the moment. For him, it was just a default setting. So when he's out there and there's 3 seconds left and the game is on the line, there's absolutely nothing in his mind about except making that shot. None of the past mistakes, none of the millions of people watching, all of that was just completely gone.
Hmm.
And I thought for the longest time about how obviously in a lot of ways that had to contribute to his success because he wasn't burdened by all the stuff that we feel ourselves burdened by every single day. So when I began reading your stuff about the living in the present, being present minded, it kind of began to bring a lot of that back, like sort of like, not only can that be a really really healthy thing, but it can also be an extremely productive thing if you're so much more in a better mindset that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Being in the present, it's a little morbid, but it sort of reminds us that life is going to end at some point.
Hmm.
It's being fully here right now is the best way to use your life. It's the best way to live the life that you have left. You don't want to be stuck worrying about the future or ruminating over the past. And the only way to truly honor this life that we live and to give it our all really is to be present. And that's sort of like, I guess, getting more into philosophy rather than like positive psychology. But yeah, there's something about being present that is foundational, right? It's a really foundational thing. Like if you do one thing, if you want to do one thing to improve your life, to be happier, to be healthier, it's being mindful, being present, because
Mhm.
everything sort of builds off of that, you know. Being optimistic builds off of that because you're not worrying about the past or you know, anxious about the future. You're just in the moment. Gratitude builds off of that, because how can you not be present and be grateful, you know? Like
Mhm.
you're here right now and you have a body that works and you can breathe and you have, you know, air to breathe and you have things to look at and you have senses to use, and how can you not be grateful, you know, for all of this that you have? So being mindful is just sort of like the smallest, or not the smallest, the lowest, the foundational building block to living a happy and healthy life.
Mhm. Well, and I also feel like not being self-aware can also lead you to miss things. You know, like if you're so busy focused on what the next step is that you're not looking at the current step here, and that's it. And I hate to keep coming back to it, but that's how you end up saying stuff like that to the barista. You know, that's because you're already thinking about, okay, I need to go over to that chair and sit down and then text my friend and enjoy your
Yeah.
drink. Okay, you too. You know,
Uh-huh.
it can leave you to, I think, miss out on a lot of little things. You know, the amount of times I'd be in a conversation or something like that, and afterwards somebody would be like, "Did you hear so and so say this?" I'm like, "No, I didn't."
Mm-mm.
You were
No.
looking right at him. Well,
Well,
oh
I wasn't
man,
there.
yeah,
You know.
I was 5 chess moves ahead,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, it's true. When we go on autopilot is when things like that come out, you know, because we're not really listening. We're not using active listening. We're not connecting, you know, with the barista on a deeper level. We're just, yeah, me too, you know, okay. We're just saying the things that we're programmed to say, which works well in terms of like you know, social lubricant and smoothing the path to get through our day, but it doesn't help us be grounded and present and connected in the moment, you know.
Mhm.
I mean, how many times have you driven home and you don't remember the entire commute
Yeah,
because it's all on autopilot? You're
yeah.
not actually experiencing any of it. You're off somewhere else, and you know, wherever you were is not more important than now.
Mhm.
It's not, you know, the life that we've already lived it. We don't need to go back through it again. It happened, you know, we learned from it. Things happened because of it. There were consequences, and now it's over.
Mhm.
And jumping ahead in our life isn't going to do us any good, because you know, we'll get there when we get there.
Mhm.
And we can kind of try to do our best to plan and prepare, but as we mentioned earlier, we have no control. Right?
Right.
We only have control when we get to that moment, so we can think ahead and we can try to plan everything out, and we can go, oh well, you know, I'm thinking about X situation, so then I'll know what to do when I get there. But how often does that really happen? We get there and we're like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing.
You're right. No, instead we're spending time binge watching our past on Netflix in our head while we're
Ah,
should be focusing on where we're driving. Instead, you're like,
yep.
man, remember that time in third grade? No. Um, so one of the things that I definitely wanted to ask you about, and I didn't, I wanted to talk about meditation, and I didn't have any specifics written down to ask because it is a subject that I know virtually nothing about. I can't even pretend to act like I know, like, oh yeah, meditation. I mean, I did a lot of meditation in third and fourth grade because Ninja Turtles were really popular
Uh-huh.
and we all thought we were ninjas. And so, of course, that meant we had to meditate. So we had to go Indian style and hum, and that meant we were ready to fight.
That
I don't
means you
know.
meditated. Yep.
I don't know how clinical that is, but we tried. So,
I remember doing that with my brother. Yep.
so in any event, I'll just turn the floor over to you. When we talk about meditation, what is sort of the goal or aim?
Um, well, it kind of depending on who you ask, but most people will say there is no goal of meditation. It's not to get anywhere. It's not to achieve anything. It's not to score points or there's really no end goal. You never reach it. Anyone who meditates won't say, yeah, you meditate, X number of hours or until you get to this certain point, then you're done. You're good. You've done it. You've meditated. Gold star. Meditation is a practice. It's something you do, should, I'm using air quotes here, should do every day, because just like mindfulness, it helps you tap into yourself, into your own experience. It helps you clear your mind and think more constructively. It helps you be more optimistic. It helps you be able to handle negative emotions and negative thoughts when they arise, which they inevitably do. It's probably the most important thing that you can do is meditation and mindfulness, and the two really go hand in hand, because mindfulness is sort of like as you go about your day, be mindful. As you wash your hands, really feel what it's like to wash your hands. Notice the sensations. And when you're doing the dishes, put your all into doing the dishes and don't let your mind wander. Just sort of focus on the dishes. And when you're taking a walk, look around you. And so mindfulness is being present moment to moment as you go about your day. And meditation is like sort of being super, super present, taking time to just sit and be present. So you're not focusing on doing. You're not focusing on doing anything in particular. You're just being. I'd say that's probably the best definition of meditation that there is. It's sitting and just being. Mm-hmm. It's just being you. It's kind of a hard thing to describe, and I know I don't always do it the best, but we're always doing something. We're always trying for something. We're always pushing for something, and meditation is just being. We're not doing anything else. We're not thinking about the past or the present or planning for the future or solving problems or, processing emotions. We're just being. And so it's helpful to start with things like, focusing on your body, right? So a lot of like guided meditations will start you off by saying, do a body scan, which is sort of like scanning, from head to toe and getting really present in your body and noticing like, oh, I have an itch there. And oh, like that hurts a little bit, or I have a body ache here, or like, wow, I feel really good after I stretched today. And then from there, getting more into the mind. So they'll guide you from sort of day-to-day autopilot, not really focusing to, okay, well, first focus on your body, and then focus on your mind. It'll move to, recognizing these thoughts that come up. And there's a ton of different types of meditation. Like there's one that's labeling. So you just label like when something comes up, whether it's a thought or whether it's a feeling. And that just helps you be mindful and in the moment. And then there's things like loving kindness meditation, where, you start by focusing on a person you love, and you like build up all of that love for them, and you kind of cultivate it and grow it into something bigger. And then you spread out that love. So there's a lot of different techniques, but the basis of meditation is just tuning in. It's tuning into you. It's just being in that moment.
That's cool. That's yeah. That sends my head in like 5 different directions. I love it. Are you or anyone in your family hunters by chance?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
My dad is a big hunter, and I used to hunt with him when I was a kid. It's been years though.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that what I got thinking about when you were saying all that. Here in the Midwest, I'm a hunter as well, especially come deer season when we get into the rut in early November, and a big bow hunter. And something that I discovered a long time ago, and I tell people about this who aren't hunters, I say, if you're not a hunter, I understand that, I respect that, but that aside, there is something about being in a tree stand and getting out there a half hour before the sun comes up and staying there till a half after sun goes down, and for 10 hours you're just sitting there. Mm-hmm. And how much attuned you get with nature doing that, especially like I said, when you get there before sunup and you get to like hear the forest wake up,
Oh,
You
yeah.
get to hear, there's a little bit of fog rolling and, eventually the, little rodents are moving, the little squirrels and rabbits, and then the birds are chirping. Um, at the end of the day, it's just dozens of species trying to get laid. I mean, when you boil it down to what it really is, but it does have its own level of beauty to it, and the leaves are rustling. And you get to the point where I found that like you had to play like certain mental games with yourself to keep from going crazy. Like because otherwise in that because like we're not wired for that kind of or we don't think we're wired for that. I shouldn't say wired. We're wired for that kind of quiet. We're not trained for that kind of quiet.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're so used to the apps and the, driving and the constant go, go, go that to just literally sit there and have nothing to do but watch the world around you. And what made me think about all this is just like you were saying, I found the best way to deal with that is to just not think.
Hmm.
Because otherwise you find yourself thinking about something and that starts driving you nuts, and then past thoughts start coming up, and then you're angry at Todd from 5th grade when he punched you in the arm and took your Voltron. You get mad over dumb stuff. It's so
Hmm.
much easier to just sit there and just kind of absorb everything, the sunlight, the gentle breeze, and just take all of that in. And I found it insanely refreshing. And there were times where it was sort of like I would be out there for 10 hours and I wouldn't see a single thing. And somehow or another, when you got down out of the tree stand and got in your truck and drove home, you just felt refreshed.
Hmm.
It was such a cool feeling. There were times where I was like, I'm kind of happy that I didn't see anything today. I think mentally I may have needed this just to sort of, recalibrate the cogs up there.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you were just doing a prolonged mindfulness experience. You're ready for one of those silent meditation retreats.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I think you're right. There's not a lot of hobbies that provide opportunity for that anymore.
Hmm.
And that's certainly something that I know my dad really enjoys about it is just the silence, is being in nature, and you don't have to try to impress anyone. There's no one around to talk to. There's nothing you need to do but wait and just
Hmm.
be. And yeah, I have some really great memories of him and I going hunting, 4:30 in the morning. And um we talk sometimes, but there was a lot of just really comfortable silence. And those were some really important bonding moments for us.
Hmm.
So he's a hunter, and he's not exactly the meditation guy, right?
Hmm.
But I think he's probably closer than he thinks he is to it, just like it sounds like you are.
Hmm.
Um, it's most people, the thought of sitting with no distractions for 10 hours is like, horrifying.
That's why it's impossible to get anybody new into it. Like, there's no way I can get another guy my age who's never done it to be like, no, it's going to be great, dude. We're going to get up. It's going to be cold. We're going to get up at 4:30. We're going to drive out in the middle of nowhere, climb into a tree stand, and you're going to sit there and don't say a word.
Yeah, don't talk to me at all. It's gonna be
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, because you'll blow the whole day if you do. that
Yeah,
that
it's
and there's something weirdly primal about it too, because of the reason you're there, and you get to the point where you're so attuned to nature and so attuned to everything that's going on around you that on top of that you kind of get lost and just sort of feeling everything.
hmm
And then somewhere off in the distance a leaf will crunch and you know and the hair stands up on the back of your neck, and all of a sudden your heart rate picks up, and it is such an insane, like, what it is. It's a rush of adrenaline.
uh-huh.
And as somebody who's driven fast cars and played sports and all that kind of stuff, there is no, like, I think, more primal adrenaline rush than being yanked out of meditation, I guess, as we're saying, for something that you're like,
hmm
it is one of the coolest feelings in the world.
Absolutely. I think
Yeah,
the only thing more primal would be, if you're hunting something that could kill you.
right. Yeah. Yeah. That's,
That's a whole other level of adrenaline there.
yeah, I got a friend of mine who's trying to talk me into going on a hunting trip with him to Australia, and I'm like, no, the things there want to kill you. There's spiders, there's snakes, everything that is in the grass wants you dead. They're like,
Yep.
you're there, dude. In Illinois, the only thing I got to worry about is getting hit by a drunk driver on my way home because he had a great time at deer camp. That's the only thing I have to
Mm-hmm.
worry about.
That's the only predator nearby for
Right.
you.
Yeah. That's so if I read it correctly, I believe I read on one of your bios somewhere that you enjoy playing video games with your husband. Did I read that right?
I did. Yeah, that's an old bio. It's a ex-husband now, but I do still
Oh,
enjoy playing video games.
I've
Yeah.
been there too, so that's all right. Um, what are you into? Are you still active?
Boy, I don't have much time for video games anymore. I'm actually I'm trying to actively carve out time for video games, which is very funny and a very big flip from how my life used to be. I'm like, nope, I can't work today because I got to play video games, but it's something that I really enjoy and something that really does help me de-stress. And as you get older, you kind of stop making time for it because other things are more important.
Mhm.
And generally they are. I used to play way too much. Like I used to play a lot, so it's better now that I'm not playing too much versus playing the way too many hours. But the game that I put the most hours into was Destiny.
Oh, okay. Bungie,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Bungie. Yep. I was a big fan. My ex-husband and I played a lot of Destiny together. And we had a
Hmm.
good friend group and we'd, do raids together. And I certainly have a lot of really good memories of like Saturday nights, with the raid crew
Right.
playing Destiny.
We
Yeah.
got, yeah, those are I always find that so interesting because there was going around on social media a couple of years ago, and I mean it's still around of it, a couple of kids playing outside in the mud, and it says great memories weren't made playing video games, and I'm like,
Uh,
You sure? I've got a couple choice ones, I'm gonna tell you.
yes. Oh my God. I mean, that feeling when you've been, playing a new raid that just dropped for hours and hours and hours and hours and maybe even a couple weeks and you finally win. It's
Mm,
just the biggest sense of accomplishment.
for sure.
And you're just all sort of yelling together and, virtual high fives and there's nothing like it. It's certainly a team building activity.
Mhm.
If you're spending all of your time on video games alone, then yeah, you're probably not making those really great memories and building the same sort of skills. But
Mhm.
there's nothing like having a really good group and achieving something like that together.
Oh, for sure. The dopamine levels are just, like, insane when you've got a
Insane.
good group of people. I've got same thing,
Yeah,
I've got a group now that we met online through playing games, and we've since become real life friends, even though we live states away from each other.
that's
We
great.
chat on Facebook and texting all the time, and, one of them has become a really good friend of mine, Scott. I live in Illinois, he lives in Michigan. We've never met in real life, but we've known each other for years. He's actually the sponsor for this podcast, with the business that he runs in. And yeah, and you're right. Like it's different now. And I try to tell people that this is a rule of thumb. If you can only carve out 30 minutes a day for video games, you need to be carving out 60. That's what I tell people. You know?
Turning my own advice back at me, I
Yeah,
see.
exactly. Exactly.
Okay, fine. So we'll maybe 30 for video games and 30 for meditation.
You see there, and you know what? If you can find a way to combine the two and be in the moment, then you can dominate. You'll like ascend to a next level of human evolution or something.
Yeah. Ultra awareness.
Right, yeah. That's weird though, the way our brains wire, when it comes to playing those kind of things, because and everybody who's ever played a game knows. Like somebody else will be playing the game, and they're like, "Hey, what button do I press to do this?" You have to like
You have to think about it.
imaginarily hold the controller in your hand and try and remember because you do it without looking. Never mind the fact when you first start playing the game, you're like, okay, this button does this, this does this.
Hmm.
And then you just get into this like free flow state of playing the game where you're just moving left, right, shoot, shoot, grenade, move, 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 move. And then when you actually like were to sit and look at the controller and say, how did I do all that?
Mm.
Like you kind of glitch almost like,
Yeah.
I don't really remember, but our brains just wire that way and just do, do,
Yep.
do, do, do.
They
Yeah.
do, yeah. A kind of a relevant topic here is neuroplasticity. That's the idea that the brain can change, and it changes through use. We form paths through how frequently we use it. So that can be a great thing for athletes who like kind of travel the same paths when they practice, 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 and practice, and build it up. And for video games, like you get so good at it because you don't even have to think about it anymore. It's just the neurons are firing together in the right way, and it's automatic. And then it can actually be a bad thing, like for PTSD, right? Is
Mhm.
like you have the pathway of trauma, and the more that you get triggered and travel through it, like the deeper it sort of sets in. So yeah, it's really interesting how our brains wire, and that's something that it's really important to pay attention to, because every day that we're using our brain, we're teaching it what to do in the future. So the more often we do things that maybe aren't like the healthiest for us, but it's like, well, I deserve a break today. If we do that too often, we're wiring our brains to keep doing that.
Mhm.
So it's important to remember that you're training your brain all the time, and it's important to train it in the way that you want it to go. Right?
Mhm. And those neural pathways, they can be a pain in the butt to rewire, but
Huge pain.
it is possible. It is definitely
Absolutely.
possible. I've found that out. I don't know how scientific this is. I have no idea. I have no training or any background on this, but I've found that typically about 90 days. I find
Hmm.
that if I have a behavior or something that I'm doing, I have to consciously make an effort to do it differently. And usually by around the 90-day point is when it becomes habit and the old
Yeah.
habit can kind of go away. But sometimes those 90 days can be a real pain in the butt, man. I mean, holy
Yeah.
cow.
Well,
And
ask anyone who's quit smoking, and they can tell you what a huge pain it is to have to reroute those pathways.
I'm working on it, man. I am working on it. It is not easy.
It's not.
No, no. And especially, you get just like you were saying, you get yourself caught in well, I've been really good for the past 4 days. I can take a break. And then that break becomes 2 days. And then
Uh-huh.
before you know it, it's like 6 months later, you're like, okay, I got to try this again.
Uh-huh.
You know, you
Yeah.
get real, real good at that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to we're getting about into time here. I want to first of all thank you so much for taking time out of your day to sit down on this podcast and have this conversation with me. I guarantee you next time I go to Starbucks and I say something stupid, I'm going to laugh even more.
Good, good. Just remind yourself, that we all do it. It's not a big deal. She's probably laughing at it and not in a, mean way. She's probably like,
Right.
I bet he's gonna remember that later.
Yeah. And I'm just going to in my head be like, Courtney told me to go look at the clouds. I got to go look at the clouds.
Yep, just go with the
Just
clouds. Go,
well,
I feel embarrassed. Interesting.
not the first time, not the last time.
Nope.
Well, all right. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is a great conversation. I want to thank you so much, and I'm probably gonna somewhere down the road reach out to you again in the future if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And I just want to drop before we leave that my next book is coming out on June 8th.
June 8th.
Yeah.
Is that the Midnight Meditations?
It is. Yep. That's the
Yes.
Midnight Meditations. So it's a book full of exercises that you can use when you wake up in the middle of the night and you cannot get back to sleep, which I think all of us have dealt with at some point. Way better than grabbing your phone and getting the blue light filter. Like it's much better to tap into a little bit of meditation. And there's a bunch of different ones. There's some breath focused ones and some body focused ones. And yeah, so yeah, check that out. June 8th. It's coming out on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of the big major retailers.
I will be reading that book cover to cover because that is like one of the hardest things that I struggle with is just, you wake up in the middle of the night and that's the worst thing, especially when you wake up in the middle of the night and we don't as a society, we don't have clocks next to our bed anymore.
Mm-mm.
You reach over and you tap your phone real quick to see what time it is. Why am I awake? And then there's like 3 notifications. You're like, oh, what did Jared say? And then before you
Sucks
know
you
it,
in.
yeah. And then you're like, yeah, that's been one of the neural pathways I'm trying to rebuild and just be like, no, I actually just today ordered an alarm clock to put next to my bed purely for the time so that I'm not tapping my phone in the middle of the night. And then, yeah. And they've even said not even brain, but even that messes up your cardiac rhythm too.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. It throws off everything about your own internal clock.
Mm-hmm.
And we all do it, but it's like the worst thing you can do when you can't fall asleep or you wake up and you can't fall back to sleep is to grab your phone. You're gonna try to avoid the phone.
Mm-hmm. At all costs.
At all costs.
And we all know it. We all know
it. We do. It's hard. It's those neural pathways,
Well, and sleep is it is so important. And it's
vital.
Every year that I get older, it becomes even more vital. You know, you
Mhm.
remember like the days when you were like 19, 20, and you're like, I can function on 4 hours of sleep. It'll suck, but I'm tough. I'll get through this 12-hour shift. No problem.
Mhm.
You know, and then
Yep.
when you get into your 40s, you're like, you know, you just like, and I saw a meme the other day that made me laugh so hard where somebody was saying, if I go to bed before 11 o'clock, I lose. And their body is saying, what are you talking about? You
No,
know,
like
like,
that should be your default.
I know. But I think unfortunately we all feel that way because sometimes it's like by the time, the kids are down and things are quiet, you're like, oh, I finally have some quiet time. And you want that quiet time to
Mm,
last. But then you
mhm.
short yourself on sleep and then you start the day next day at even more of a deficit and
Big cycle.
on and on it goes for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I got them. Yeah, I am going to be reading that book cover to cover. I have this one right now.
Oh,
The
yeah, that's
camera
my
can see
first
it.
one.
And I was kind of mad because when we first talked about being on this podcast, I'm like, oh, well, definitely. I started looking at the different books you'd written. I thought this one would be really interesting. Amazon just got it to me 2 hours ago. So
Oh.
my
Nice
plan was,
timing, Amazon.
yeah, my plan was to get it and read it prior to this podcast, but instead, what's that section called? Preface. Yeah, that's where I'm at. So,
So you got pretty
well,
far.
yeah, but that will be my thing. So, again, for the third time, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Wish you nothing but the best. And Midnight Meditations, June 8th.
June 8th.
June 8th. Okay, we'll be
Yeah.
looking for that. All right. Well, thank you so much, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you. I had a great time.
Hey, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.